Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Planning Committee meeting of South Oxfordshire District Council. I am Councillor Peter Dragonetti, and I'm chairing this meeting. Only members of the Planning Committee who are here in person are allowed to vote. We'll be hearing from objectors, supporters, and parish and perhaps ward members in person. Only in person. Only those who are registered with the external speakers turn off their camera and their microphones until called upon to speak. Only those who are registered speakers will be allowed to speak at this meeting or will be called on at the appropriate time. Voting will be by show of hands unless there is a dispute, in which case I will ask the clerk to take a roll call. And can everyone please mute or switch off their mobile phones? Now, in the event of an emergency, can everyone leave the room by the entrance by which they came? They'll be directed to the front of the building. Right. Item 2 then is apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies for absence were received from Councillors Ken Arlett, David Brotherton, Tim Bearder and Elizabeth Gillespie.
Very much. We have minutes of the meetings, item 3, the minutes of the previous meeting. We have the minutes of the meeting held on the 15th of March. Can we adopt and sign them? I'd like to propose that. Thank you. And second, thank you. All those in favour? Yes, I will proceed to sign them. Thank you. Four declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Thank you. Urgent business then. Now, do we have any urgent business? Excellent. Item 6, proposals for site visits. Do we have any proposals for site visits? I see none, so we'll proceed then with item 7 and 8 to discuss the applications before us this evening. First of which is oh, I have one more attendee. Just from time for us. Right. First item then of the planning applications is on page 13 of our agenda item 8, an application for the change of use of the existing hub, the Horse and Harrow, to a 3-bedroom dwelling and a 4-bedroom dwelling, and the erection of 3-bedroom and 2 4-bedroom dwellings on land adjacent. And that's where we have the officer's report. And you here would like to speak to it?
Thank you, Chair. The officer recommendation is for approval, subject to the conditions listed at the end of the committee report. The application is referred to committee for 2 reasons. The parish council object, and also the development management manager has referred it to committee as a staff member lives in the upper flat above the pub. The parish council are concerned that the owners have made no attempt to establish what villagers would like to be done within the pub. They're concerned that there'll be nowhere else in the village for the villagers to meet, and they've also commented that this is the last remaining pub in the village. So you can see on the screens at the moment the location plan. So the site consists of a pub and overflow car parking in a parcel of land to the west. It's located on Main Street, southwestern fringe of West Hagbourne. Neighbouring dwellings are situated to the east, the south, whilst dwellings are currently under construction to the west. The overflow car park, which forms the western part of the site, is within the AO&B, whilst the pub is situated within the West Hagbourne Conservation Area, which runs to the east. The plan that's on screen now is the site, proposed site plan. Planning permission is sought for the change of use of the pub to provide a 3-bed dwelling and also a 4-bed semi-detached property adjoining. To the east, it's proposing the erection of a detached 3-bed and 2 detached 4-bed dwellings on land parcel to the west. The development is considered to be infill development, as it would infill a small gap in between existing dwellings. Officers have instructed an independent viability assessor to advise whether the public house is considered an essential community facility and whether it is economically viable. The independent viability assessor has advised that the pub is no longer considered an essential community facility, commenting that the George and Dragon pub, which is approximately half a mile away from the village of Upton, is sufficient distance for villagers to use. The assessor has also advised that the pub is not and is unlikely to be viable in the future. The plan on screen at the moment is a street scene plan to show you how it will look from the north on Main Street. The pub here. The next photo that you can see is a CGI image, just to give you an idea of how the pubs will blend into the existing street scene. The dwellings will be designed with a mix of pitched and hipped roofs, with a white render finish to appear in keeping with the recently approved dwellings, which are located to the east and west. I'll just show you some photos of the site. So this is the site from the north on Main Street. And just to clarify, the existing outbuildings that you can see here will be demolished as part of the works. This is the view from the overflow car park area to the west, the western parcel. The car park to the rear. Again, this is just a view of the rear car park. Note the recently approved dwellings just here. Yes, there is. The view from Main Street to the east. And finally, site photo, the western parcel, note the dwelling with the construction. No technical objections have been received from specialist officers, and overall, in the planning balance, the benefits of the development outweigh any potential harm. As such, the application is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
I go to the first of our public speakers, which is Michael Butler from West Hagbourne Parish Council. Michael, like to take the chair.
Thank you.
When you're ready, you'll have five minutes.
I'm Michael Butler, the chair of West Hagbourne Parish Council. I've been in the village for almost 40 years. I've been going to the Horse and Harrow public house for almost 40 years. When I first went to the pub, quite a few of the customers were farm workers. The people who lived in the village, a lot of them was to do with farms. But it's all changed now. We don't get many farm workers down there. The people who live in the village no longer connected with farming as such. They work at various places up at Harwell and so forth. There's a change in the nature of the people in the village. And I think one of the things I want to say is that what would appeal to people who live in the village now isn't the same as what would appeal to farm workers 40 years ago. They need something better. They expect more than the Horse and Harrow provides at present. That is something that has to be stressed. It's not a well-supported pub in the village. And that is the reason why few villagers can be considered as regular customers. I go there a couple of times a week with another member of the council just for a chat, but very few other people from the village come down. It's not well attended. The reason it is not, of course, is that the pub itself does not lend itself being attended by people who live in the village now. There's been hardly any investment in the property. It is not a pleasant place to go to. The decor is very dated, fading and so forth. When you go into the property, the first thing you see is often quite an important thing. You go into a pub, and the scene that greets people when they enter the Horse and Harrow these days is often a big TV screen with horse racing on it and people cheering on the horses and so forth. That is not going to appeal to people who live in the village now. They simply don't like it. The whole place is going downhill. The lavatories need to be upgraded. I can only speak personally for the gents, but I prefer not to go there. It's really an unpleasant place to go into. So the pub needs investment, and it needs to be upgraded by someone paying attention to the type of villager that lives nearby. People who want to go to the pub. And quite a lot of people used to go to the pub, but as the pub's been run down and we've run out of staff and so forth, we don't go, people from the village don't go down very much anymore. The pub needs to be invested in by somebody paying attention to the villagers and the type of thing they want. And the only thing I'm saying is that if they turn it into a good pub, then people will go to it from the village, from surrounding village, from Didcot and so forth. People will go to a good pub, but nobody's going to go to what is essentially a bad pub. What makes a pub a good
You have
pub
30
is,
seconds. You have 30 seconds left.
what makes a pub a good pub is hard to say. My favourite pub doesn't have any special restaurants and so forth. It's the Bell at Dordworth. I love trotting over there, and it's a very nice pub. They serve rolls. That's what they serve there. You don't have to have a big menu to make a pub a good pub.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Have we got any questions for?
Yes, thank you. I'm a bit confused because the parish council is objecting to this,
Yeah.
but you're not also supportive of the present pub. But is it that you would rather see a better pub put there than what is before us this evening, the planning application?
Well, in the pub before you this evening.
Mm.
The pub should be improved. Should be improved by getting decent design work done, getting decent staff in, getting people who can run, know how to cope with beer sellers and so forth.
But as the nature of the village has changed, the argument from the council was this was the place to meet up. But it seems like the villagers didn't meet up there anyway, did they, in the present pub?
Only once a month we have a lunch meeting there. We'll get together, 20 of us.
Thank you.
Councillor Snowden, wish to?
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions actually. Did you at any point apply for or think about applying for Set of community value. I put the acronym down before. No. And do you use it as that's not a polling station, is it, for the village?
No.
No. Final question. Did the pub or the owners of the pub, did they engage with the village or parish council about turning into a community pub at all?
No.
Thank you.
Any further questions for parish councillor? Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, we now have David Cooper.
Thank you. I was the Pub Protection Officer for the South Oxfordshire branch of the Campaign for Real Ale, and protection of pubs is one of our major points at the moment. So can I start by reminding members of the motion that was passed at the council on the 25th of March 2021 that this council supports the local network of pubs in the district and will use its powers to ensure that pubs continue to be able to provide for the local community in accordance with local plan policy CF1, which notes that the council will support communities in protecting, enhancing and delivering community and recreation facilities in their towns and villages. With pubs under continual threat of closure and conversion, where there's strong community support evidenced by submission of a nomination as an asset of community value, or opposition to a planning application, which is the case here, for change of use, the council will use all its available powers, where appropriate, to support communities in their efforts to retain pubs for the benefit of both the local community and the whole district. And you'll also be aware of the strong support for retention of community facilities in Chapter 10 of the local plan, embodied in policy CF1 and the supplementary document Community Facilities Viability Assessment. This latter document sets out steps required to decide whether or not the pub's viable. And I think the outcome of this application would depend mainly on whether you're convinced about the economic viability. To do this, it's necessary to follow the steps in that document. There isn't time to go through all of these, so I'll be brief. But first of all, has the applicant taken sufficient steps to try and make the facility viable, or whether further actions would make it viable? Has it been well maintained? Will the product range be extended to cater for other needs? Could the pub be developed to cater for different groups? Does it have unused rooms or outbuildings that could be used? Where and how long has it been advertised for sale? Has it been offered for sale as a going concern? Have any evaluations been carried out? Has professional business advice been sought? The answer to most of those is no. Certainly, the only one that we've got any positive information about is whether it's been well maintained, and I think we know that that isn't the case. So there doesn't seem to be anything in the planning officer's report to address those issues. What we do have are two, to all intents and purposes, identical economic viability reports. I'm sure you've seen quite a lot of these over the years. They're very formulaic and invariably come out with the conclusion that the pub is not economically viable. That is probably because that's what the client wants it to say. I don't suppose that if it said that, yes, it's economically viable, it would appear in the application. So it's garbage in, turn the handle, garbage out. No consideration of possible alternative uses, letting rooms, village shop, coffee mornings, baby and toddler sessions, etc. have been mentioned. So the viability assessment actually is seriously lacking. Replacement community facilities, Chapter 10 of the local plan and policy CF1 also talk about creating replacement community facilities where they're lost. There's no mention of that in the application or in the officer's report. And on the wider question of protection of community facilities, let's not forget
that the Horse and Harrow isn't just the only pub in the village, it's the only community building of any kind whatsoever. So what this application would do is to give the village 5 houses, reduce the number of community facilities to support these occupants as well as everyone else in the village to 0. So now, what are the alternatives? Well, the Georgian Dragon seems to be the favourite in the application and in the opposition report. But to get there without having to drive, which doesn't mix well with drinking alcohol, you first have to pass the Horse and Harrow and then walk 250 metres or so along a very narrow bit of road, and then a further 600 or 700 metres alongside the very busy A417. Well, there isn't fun at the footpath, but neither route could be described as fun on a wet and dark night. Getting to other pubs is even worse. Crucially, none of those alternatives is in the village where you live.
I think
Thank you.
that's your time, Mr. Cooper. Thank you very much. Have we got any questions for David here? If I can ask you one, do you think you question the viability reports? Have you seen reports, economic viability reports that have been negative in this way, and then pubs have then subsequently come to life again?
Oh, yes, absolutely. There are a lovely, give you the example of the Crown in South Morton, where the viability report said, no, it's not viable. Wadworth decided that they didn't want it anymore. They sold it to a developer, and then it was eventually reopened under community ownership and is now the heart and soul of the village.
So that viability reports aren't always gospel. Is that what you're saying?
That's right. I mean, they just go through a standard set of things. I mean, if you look on the first viability report, it talks about requiring 100 or 200 covers to make it viable. I can't think of any pubs in South Oxfordshire that have got that many.
No. In your opinion, the pub would be viable, perhaps?
Well, yes. I mean, not the way it's being run at the moment, but with an imaginative licensee, it could well be.
Thank you much. Any further questions for Cooper? No, I see none. Okay. Thank you very much then. In that case, we'll thank you for your conversation, and we'll now move on to the support for this application for Christian Roberts and Jeremy Capel.
Evening, Chair and members.
Okay, you'll have about 5 minutes between you.
Between you, yeah, no, that's absolutely fine. We worked it out. Just about.
Okay, ready.
Good evening, Chair and members. Thank you for inviting us to address you. My name is Christian Roberts. I'm one of the directors of Cordage Group, who are the applicants. Cordage is a family-owned and run company who work with UK pub groups to find value and reinvest in their estates to keep their pubs flourishing. The company started its life actually running our own pubs, and so our family's main aim has always been to help pubs and those in their community. As we are all aware, the site has had difficult history and many faults, which has been highlighted in both Savills viability report and the council's independent review. We thus believe that the application we have put forward will provide high-quality family homes from this failed site. This excellent opportunity will deliver much-needed family homes in a not only a sustainable way, but will be built by local builders, and using local labour, and thus offering inward investment into the local community. We very much care what happens to the site and to those around the village. As a family company who also live and work in a similarly small rural village to West Hagbourne, we know how important minimising disruption during the build phase will be. We will work tirelessly to ensure the project is completed in a timely and safe manner, which does not disrupt the lives of those in the village. Again, for myself, I'd like to say this opportunity to thank the committee and the local community for the opportunity to talk this evening about this exciting project. We believe as a family, we put the best planning application forward to reutilise the land in a manner that is not only in keeping with the village of West Hagmore, but that benefits the people who live there locally.
Good evening, Chair and members. Thank you for inviting me to address you. I'm the agent for the planning application. You will, I'm sure, have seen the committee briefing that my client circulated to all members of the planning committee. I hope that was useful to you. It outlines the opportunity the application presents to deliver high quality homes which complement the AONB and the conservation area. As you've heard, the scheme will see the public house converted into 2 homes with 3 homes built adjacent. The proposed homes are in keeping with the scale and character of nearby dwellings and follow considerable engagement with your officers, with consultees, with the parish council, with local councillors and with the community. We've worked hard to make changes to the scheme to incorporate the comments we've received. The conservation officer has raised no objection to the design of the homes and confirmed that the conversion of the pub will actually remove 20th century additions which currently detract from its appearance. Your case officers confirmed there are no technical or policy concerns with the proposals. The proposals are also supported by all of your council's professional consultees. Because the scheme results in the loss of the public house, detailed evidence has been provided to satisfy policy CF1, the main test of which is whether the pub is viable or not. The applicant has commissioned a viability study from Savills, which has assessed the proposals against Cameron's own viability test and concludes that the pub is indeed unviable. The council has commissioned its own viability report from the firm of Davis, Coffer and Lyons. And I would like to pick up on the comment made by the Cameron representative because the implication was that these reports are not independent and are in some way biased, but in fact this is an independent report commissioned by the council, not by the applicant, and therefore I think you can rely on its conclusions as being independent and fair. They conclude that the annual profit projected would be a maximum of £2,375 going forward, and that depends on an investment of at least 100,000. And this would pick up on the points made by the parish council about the fact that the pub does indeed need significant investment as it stands. No operator is going to invest that amount of money for such a small return. The report concludes, I'm of the opinion that the Horse and Harrow is not a viable business as a public house. I therefore agree with the conclusions of the applicant's own viability report. So that's the independent viability report speaking there. Savills have highlighted the public house is struggling to break even and is expected to lose money in future. The issues being the small size of the pub and its small kitchen. Thank you. The limited catchment with only 300 people living in the village and the number of competing pubs, which is 9 within a 3-mile radius. Savills conclude the business appears not to be capable of delivering a reasonable annual profit and will not attract operators looking to buy or rent at a reasonable and sustainable level of return. I'm of the opinion that property is not viable now and in the longer term. So in summary, 2 professional viability reports, one of which is independent, have concluded that the property is not viable in its current use.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your attention.
Do we have any questions for the applicant? Councillor Casey-Rahay.
Yeah, thank you for that. I just wanted to ask you, as that you're saying you're the owner.
So the applicant. Yeah.
So, the investment in the pub over the last 5 years, let's say, for example, can you give us an idea of how much has been invested, time as well as money?
Yeah, I mean, Tony and Helen, who are the tenants who've been there, they've been there for just under 12 years now. They have invested significant amounts of their own money and time trying to bring it to, forward as a working business. They unfortunately haven't been able to. The previous pub group, which I believe was Hawthorne, similarly, then got sold on to Admiral as well. Both saw it. They've invested time and money into it, and unfortunately, they cannot make it viable. So, there's been various people that have tried over the last 12 years that, we've been involved with the tenants that unfortunately haven't been able to make it work.
And another question, if that's all right.
Yeah, please.
So obviously it's very important for the community because it's a community asset in the village. And I just want a sense of, has there been much engagement with the community and how that?
Yeah, so I mean, we've obviously engaged with the parish, and there was no, correct me if I'm wrong, this wasn't brought to light. There was only questions about design, which were brought forward as the objection, which we dealt with our significant changes halfway through. Tony and Helen have tried desperately to be involved in the parish, and there has been numerous times where parish or events in the village have been held elsewhere. That included, I think it was it?
I know Tony sent us a list of events that have gone elsewhere and not in the
Yeah,
park.
yeah. I think that that's been a concern for him, that opportunities that could have arose, for significant local buy-in, unfortunately were taken elsewhere. And whether that's because of, well, it's obviously because of the pub, but if that's the bottom line, that people are going elsewhere on times when you would usually go to a pub, then he's never gonna make strides to make it a viable business.
I think the coronation celebrations are going to the village hall, for example, and
Yeah.
that's just one example of the pub not being used when clearly it would be the ideal place to go.
Councillor Snowden?
What village hall? Apparently there's no other community builders.
Well, that's
a different village.
That's an East Hagbourne, so I think
So
it serves.
it's not the West Hagbourne.
Well, I think
celebration.
it serves overall Hagbourne, as I understand it.
So I'm getting tracking information here because the parish council has been going there for 40 years. I've been in and out for many, many years. You're talking about investment over periods of time from different owners, things that I can't. I mean, what do you class as investment then? Just painting it? 'Cause I can't remember anything. There was an outside area put up for when the smoking ban came in, but
Well, there's different levels of investment that go into a pub every year. That's maintenance, that's putting into so restoration work, capex spends on making the pub look good and maintain its working life. I mean, unfortunately, I think as to be fair, has been discussed. Local needs change, and unfortunately, with that, and also the only 300 people in the village, there's only so much you can do, especially when you have wider things available.
okay. I think the village thing is a bit. People used to come back from Ireland and stop up there for a pub and really stuff, and the motorbike nights they used to be. So it's probably just about the village. Yeah. But my concern is viability side of things, because this pub has been very, very profitable for the last 5 years, hasn't it?
It certainly hasn't been. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here.
Well, you've got planning for 5 separate houses. I mean, that wasn't a charitable thing, was it?
I don't know the pub myself, so.
Right. So they've had planning for 5 houses, so that's made a lot of money. If one of those houses had been spent investing in actually doing up the place, it might have been what I would class as investment.
As I said, so just in terms of both viability reports, we'll take all of the accounts from the last, I can't remember how many years they said it over. Certainly Tony and Helen's accounts are in those viability reports, and those are the ones tested, and they see all of their takes over the last, at least 10 years.
So, right. So they're the tenants, the owners of the land. Was that your company then, or?
No, the owner is Admiral Tennant.
So they've taken out the money from the sales of the plots of land and so on.
Well, no, the money goes back into the whole pool of the pub. I mean, we spend on the pub as much as we can spend on the pub.
So it must have made a profit then. Anyway, okay, thank you.
Oh, yeah, I mean, a lot of money has been spent in that area on that pub, and it's still not turning any profit. I mean, I think that's not mine, unfortunately, for the business.
Could you just clarify that? So we've been advised that new houses being built and are currently being built to the west and previously to the east. Was that on land that was previously associated with the pub and owned by Moorlands?
I believe so. I mean, so we weren't involved.
No, but so there was this pub was sitting in the centre of quite a large area of land, so sufficient for 5 houses that have been built there.
Just to clarify, the houses to the west, the Scotland's Ash garage, nothing to do with the pub. 3 houses to the east were to do with the pub. So 3 of the 8 were on pub land.
Right. So the land ownership was all in one ownership and has been. Would that be? Am I right in saying? Understand?
I indicate.
Yeah, please do.
The curtilage of the pub used to come out to here. This is an old house. these are the new houses. I was under the impression this was part of it. It was just this,
Just that bit.
just that bit there.
Garage. I can't remember what the garage is called.
Because when they used yeah, this is Scotland, that's good. When they used to have the bike, that's where the bikes used to use the facilities, but obviously that was lost when the land was lost, but. Still opposite.
Yes, sorry.
Yeah, as Councillor Snowden said, the permission to the west, permission to the west was the former garage site, and as Councillor Snowden said, that was part of the pub's land. It was used for staff car parking, I believe. Permission was granted in 2017 for those properties, and the land to the west, actually, as part of that permission, was granted as overflow car park to mitigate the loss of car parking spaces.
Well, while you're talking, can I get a point of clarification on the two other relevant in 2020 and 2021, 3 and 4 bedroom house? That's got relevant planning, nothing to do with the site at all.
It's not owned, but officers feel it's relevant.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Infill developments.
You say they've made every effort. That's supposed to be an overflow car park on the left. I've been past this place the last 9 months every day.
Mm-hmm.
In the evenings, it's so full up that I've never seen anybody parking there. It's not suitable for parking on, so that's not correct as far as I'm aware. I'm being careful I say that. But the cars are parked all the way down where it says track. So things haven't been explored. This isn't correct, I'm afraid. That is just wasteland. You can't get a car up there that I'm aware of. I've never seen a car park there, I believe.
Okay.
You know, so yeah. So my question is it a car park or not? Thank you. To whoever. I don't think it's being used as one like they said.
Sorry, question. Should we ask you?
Yeah.
We'd like to explain this situation.
Well, it certainly is a car park. It's certainly been used as a car park by the pub for as long as Tony and Ellen have been there. Like I said, I believe the staff car park was to the other side. But yeah, certainly on Google Maps you can go and look, and there are cars parked in the car park. And it certainly was seen by the council and the case officer as a car park.
And also a question. So the pub has been in use. What is it trading at the moment? Yeah, it's open. Yeah, it is open. Right, but it's so it's a presumably then it's sort of semi-viable at some point. Otherwise, the tenant would be walked away.
It certainly was at one point. You know, as you said.
Sorry. Well, I mean, the viability report explains that returns from pub have dwindled, and now it's pretty much just breaking even, and that's really just the tenant hanging on whilst this process is concluded. So, you know, the profit levels have gone right down, and it's, as I say, barely breaking even is the current situation.
But it is a trading pub. Has it been advertised as such in the trade press as a trading pub?
No, it hasn't been advertised. I mean, the reason for that is because the viability report makes such grim reading that it's questionable whether there's any value to doing that. And, you know, in relation to your policy CF1, there's no requirement for a marketing period. It's just about the viability of the pub. That's what your local plan requires the test to be.
Yeah. But if I can ask you further on this, the viability report is just a desk exercise, isn't it? And the real viability is whether, if it was advertised, a possibly more dynamic tenant could come in and turn it from something which appears to be unviable to something which is viable. I mean, the camera. Sorry. Lesson has explained, as we know, the example of the Crown at South Morton.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, or I don't know if you want to quote, I mean, certainly they can do, but in terms of the level of investment to the amount that, you know, physically can be brought in, it just doesn't really make a lot of sense.
No, I mean, that's the independent viability report, and it doesn't mince its words. To my mind, it's absolutely clear that this is a pub that sadly doesn't have a future. And I think you heard from the chairman of the parish council, the reason why, that the villagers just don't use it anymore, don't see it as a valuable asset. And I mean, I understand why you would want to take an optimistic view that a pub could be saved, but I don't think anyone reading that independent report could conclude that there's either the size of pub or the size of catchment or any sort of niche that it can fill, given the level of competition within the 3 mile radius. So I just think there's no way really you can argue with the facts set out by the independent appraiser.
In my opinion, there's aren't facts, there's some opinions, but there we are. That's the case.
Yeah, so I just want to dig down a little bit more into this investment that has been or hasn't happened in the last few years. I mean, 5 years something. So the viability report says it needs about 100,000 spending on it. Now, to me, that suggests that not much has been spent on it, because 100,000 is not a lot of money for a going business. And you would expect, a viable, a going concern to have the owners, not the tenants, the owners to have some sort of investment plan. So you must have an idea from the owners of what the investment was over the last 5 or 10 years and how much that was, or an estimate at least.
Yeah, I don't have that to hand. But I mean, as I said, we do work with pub groups, and we know that the investment, they'll put the investment to keep the pub going as much as they can. But obviously, there's a bottom line when you can't. No one's going to keep putting in when it's just not viable, unfortunately. And as we said, the documents don't lie, and I appreciate they are seen as opinions, but they are professional opinions that are done, with calculations that are tested, all the time across the country, and that take into account a lot of the, a lot of the factors that to be fair, have been spoken about by the Camera representative.
Okay, but it seems to me that you could look at any business, and if it's not invested in after 5 or 10 years, it becomes unviable because it's not invested in. And actually, what the parish council said seemed to me, gave me the impression that's exactly what's happened. And I don't know if you, it's not a particular question, but you can comment on what I'm saying for clarification. The sale of the land that belonged to the pub or belonged to the owners of the pub, so the company, none of that was invested into the pub. Is that correct? None of the return of the profit.
As I said, we weren't involved in that development, and I can't comment on any end development outside of this application we had for you today.
I do think it becomes a sort of vicious circle, unfortunately, that if the customer isn't there, then you're not going to invest in the pub. And I think, these reports make it clear that it'd be a brave investor who was willing to commit to the pub. And the 100,000 is only a minimum figure. There's a figure of 900,000 quoted in one of these reports if you want to do a full job of bringing the pub up to where it might need to be. So 100,000 is just the bare minimum, scratching the surface. And, it's a lot of money to invest when the returns predicted are so small. So, that's the reality, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think the returns predicted was something like still £2,000.
£2,000 a year.
Yeah, and that's not taking in, any ups and downs. Yeah, sorry. When everything's taken out, and that's with the 100,000 to, as we discussed, minimum required.
Would you just agree with me that if we felt that it's your whole application is based on the viability report, isn't it? That's the whole thing. If that report we felt it wasn't correct, or one of us felt it wasn't correct, you can understand why we would be a bit dubious, wouldn't you?
Certainly would, but I then
question that. Yeah.
Well, no. I mean, if it was just a sales report, I completely understand.
Yeah.
That's something that we obviously brought forward to support the application. Alongside obviously all the other reports that have dealt with all the other professional needs of any application. It's not just this that it hinges on, but then the independent report that's brought to you by the council independently that has solidified, and then double down on what's been discussed. If that hadn't been there, I can see how people can question that, but I fail to see how we can't really question.
No, but I'm not questioning you guys, and I understand that, but I question. I think the independent report flawed in many ways. It's not your fault, it's independent, but there's a lot of missing information from there, which I think would be important. More importantly, for example, the Red Lion, which is 2 miles away, isn't even mentioned there, and they've spent money on that, and it's a smaller type, but it's very profitable. I don't quite know why the courts missed that pub out, but thank you for your answer.
Thank you, Councillor Stone. Any further questions for the applicants? I see none in that case, so thank you very much for your time. Thank you. I think we have the councillors here this evening. We can go to questions for the officer.
Following on from that, the Red Lion, you can't get in for a drink, let alone a meal. It's 2 miles away. It's not mentioned in the viability report. I mean, why have they picked which pubs that they've chosen to use in the viability report?
I should assume it's the Red Lion.
Blueberry, it's this side
Yeah.
of Blueberry, yeah.
I'm not sure, to tell the truth. I know they've had a look at a list of pubs that they've referred to.
So they've got all the way into Didcot rather than the village.
Yeah.
When we often, when at Christmas Day, we used to walk from across the field with their dogs to the Red Line, but you don't do that, you can't get in the Red Line, it's too busy.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not sure why they've not included that in the report.
Okay.
Where is the Red Line, Councillor Stone?
Blueberry, 2 miles.
Blueberry. Oh yes, indeed. Yeah,
Just
thank you.
Just under 2 miles. That's got no passing trade because that's down the end of it. You literally have to hunt for the place to find it. Yeah. Can I just ask you, the motion that we spoke about earlier, this council would use all its powers to collect the last pub in the village when it's, the last one. Have you demonstrated that in this application?
Yeah, so I think the crucial element, if you like, in terms of the principle of the change of use is policy CF1.
Yeah.
And there's 3 strands to the policy. This meets 2 of them. And it only has to meet 1 of the 3 criteria. In officer's view, criterion 2 has been determined that the community facility is no longer needed. I'll touch on that in a minute for you. And 3, it's the case of commercial services. This is not economically viable. So there are 2 issues that we've been talking about in terms of viability assessments. So criterion 2, no longer needed. The assessor has stated that we've got a population of 300 people in the village. They feel that community facility of this kind is not necessarily needed for the population. He's then looked, essentially, this is a summary of what he said, he's then looked at what is available in the local area, and he feels that villagers can walk half a mile to the nearest pub, which I believe is the George and Dragon in Upton. So that's that strand, and as I say, it needs to meet 1 of these 2 criteria. Criterion 3, talk in detail about viability. Yeah, if you've got any questions with regards to a little bit more detail, then I'm happy to ask. Well, that's essentially.
I'm just wondering where the use of all of our powers is. Where we added that, because that's not a safe walk. Right, it's not lit. There's no footpath and a big chunk of it. So
Yeah.
Curious about that one. And do we not, use of our powers, could we not ask them to put a sale in as a going concern? We don't have that option because it seems they've stripped the assets down to the bare minimum. I'll stop with the money from that, and now they're saying it's unviable. It's not unviable. It's still stated it's profitable, even though it's missing out the examples of pubs locally that actually are. So I don't know quite how they made the comparison. They picked the pubs that are not doing very well to compare it to.
Yeah, I don't know. I've just doubled down really on the fact that it is an independent study.
Yeah.
It's been commissioned by officers. In terms of the use of all of our powers, I think that was referenced by Jack from the parish council.
From Canberra.
Yeah, from Canberra. It's not something officers have stated, or there's no policy.
It was unanimously agreed at full council
right
2 years ago.
I think all I would stress is, and as it's been discussed, residents of the village, as they do all throughout the district for community facilities, do have the option to have an ACV listing, an asset of community value. This isn't protected in that instance, and if it was, then residents would have first rights of, the opportunity as we found in other villages in the district.
But just to clarify, the motion did cover that because it said either an asset of community value or opposition to a planning application. So it is still covered by that motion. That motion was never taken any further than just left dormant. Was it? Officers weren't informed of it?
If I can come in there, a motion to council is a consideration.
Yeah.
But in terms of assessing the planning application, the national and local adopted policies are the key considerations. And I'm satisfied that the officers have gone through the relevant material planning considerations in their assessment. We always start on the basis that we want to keep a pub. We recognise the contribution that they make to local villages. And we have been successful on a number of occasions at retaining pubs. Generally, that's where we've had an independent viability assessment that's been supportive, and also where we've had a strong reaction from the local community. I think it's important to note here, unusually, we've only got 10 objections in a community of 300. And I think that if we'd had a stronger reaction from the local community and a more balanced result from the independent assessment, the officer recommendation to you might be different. But those two factors would be really important if this application is tested in an appeal scenario.
Can I just finish on this one then? Just again, clarification. So, I mean, I would say to your last point, because it's been left to deteriorate to such a state that village, like you said, the parish councillor there, that it's almost an embarrassment how much they're there to go. So that's probably why there's not been a massive opposition to it. It's a lot of it's used by people coming from Harwell, etc., into the area, so they would have been notified about this application in any case because it's been Vale of White Horse people using it, because obviously it's on the boundary. What weight are we allowed to add to the fact that I think the viability report has got flaws in it? As I've identified, I've identified one of the areas that I think is flawed.
So I hear your opinion.
Yeah.
Obviously, in seeking an independent view, we are careful to select somebody that we think have the appropriate expertise. We've shared that report with you. I hear that some people think there might be some omissions. We think it's a robust piece of work, and we think that that would stand up if it's tested in a appeal scenario. So we would be asked, what expertise do others bring to the table? What can they quote that they feel is missing if they wish to challenge that?
Local knowledge, knowing that they've missed out pubs, doesn't mean counters.
You've cited one example of a pub that sounds like it would be helpful if it had been included. I think it would be more than just pointing to one pub being admitted if it was to be challenged successfully. And just on the point of kind of the reaction, we know that where local communities are mobilised, usually it doesn't take long for the word to spread about a planning application. And we have had examples where literally the whole village has opposed the loss of their pub. And I think this is a comparatively low response. Just I'd meant to take that into account.
That's very, very helpful, I think, to us, understanding on this. Any further questions for the officer?
I just get another clarification, because every time we get a commercial building that's going to be converted, we're often, the commercial officers are always asking us how long it's been for sale for, and so forth. Well, why do we do that? There's no need for them to actually put it up for sale. They can just say it's unviable. And
I think possibly you're referring to a different policy, which is about testing in the collection, say business premises. Just trying to think.
we have a lot in Tame and places like that. We can't convert a shop because it hasn't been put for sale.
Yeah, I think Paul is right. Invariably, we have related policies directed to businesses, for retail and employment.
space.
Yeah, so
This is going to be loss of employment here, isn't it? So that's what I'm just asking the clarification between the difference between shops not being allowed because of not being put up for sale for a certain amount of time, and then
You are right, there are occasions where we have requirements to conduct masking exercises, but obviously CF1 doesn't require the applicant to do this in this particular case.
Okay.
So that wouldn't
Okay.
be something that counts against it.
Actually, no, the further questions, the officer, councillor?
Yeah, just one more, just a clarification on the conservation area. So it's the pub sort of role in the conservation area, if you like. That's not particular to this conservation area. It's not been brought out in any way. It doesn't have any importance. Is that?
yeah, it does actually. It's a I believe it's a non-designated heritage asset. So yeah, keep on this plan actually. If you refer to that, so the conservation area actually starts in the eastern parcel where the pub is, and so the western parcel falls outside of it. And if I flip to some of the photographs, see the view from the north on Main Street. None of these outbuildings that have been erected will be demolished. And the conservation officer has actually stated that in their view, and with, I'll just show you the car park as well, the loss of the hard standing car park, it will actually improve the conservation area. So the conservation officer's view is, well, they support the application in terms of its enhancement of the conservation area.
I'm sorry, that's supposed to be the car park in the foreground.
Yes.
That's what I'm just saying all the
So
time.
I'd like to clarify the car parking. I understand.
It's a piece of rough ground.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying. It's not a car park. You wouldn't think it was a car park.
The response to that is the 2017 application for the dwellings that were in the former car park that I referenced earlier. When that application was under consideration, the parish council raised concerns with regards to car parking, the loss of car parking. So the officer at the time attached the condition 5 of the 2017 application, which is listed in the history, and that was for it to be used as overflow car parking space. That was a locked in as a condition.
But I couldn't put my motorbike on there. That's what I call a car park. I'm sorry. I know it's not-
appreciate
That doesn't say anywhere that it's a car park. I go past there every single day. I know it's not you, but that's not a car park.
around the surface. Just back on the relevant planning history. You've got fifth one that's currently under consideration. In the field opposite, got a plan application for quite a substantial major development.
I'm not per se. I'm not 100% sure. But are you referring to Valley Barn?
No. Right, opposite field.
Oh, not that I'm aware of. But I think
You might be able to check our system just to
Oh,
make it mark whether there's, and it wouldn't impact directly on the merits.
No, but everyone keeps saying there's only 300 residents. I'm just thinking, what houses going there? You'd be meeting up to.
I think I just Paul is correct. It wouldn't have really an implication, but if anything, it would strengthen the infill argument, albeit that it's not built yet.
I don't think anybody's worried about the infield. I don't think you're disagreeing with that side of things. It's a question of selling off the assets, and then we get planning permission to build 3 houses there, and then we're saying it's not got big enough car park. We allowed the liability ourselves, but anyway.
To be clear, Gaston, I don't think we're saying it's got an allowed car park. That's what officers are.
Okay.
Okay, well, thank you. And no further questions of the officer. I think we can now look for our recommendation to come forward with the proposal. Councillor Snowden, yes.
My issue is finding the reasons that will hold up at the field. try. Okay, I'll move a motion against officer's recommendation. I would be much happier if they tried to sell this as a going concern. I'd be even more happier if they'd actually invested some money, because tenants, Helen and Tony, clearly could have been more driven as tenants if you know that money's being invested in a new kitchen and, you know, stuff like that. There's been deterioration for decades by the sound of it. They've sold off usable land that they used to use for things like gathering and so forth. So you can understand that tenants losing their mojo and interest in promoting the pub and trying new things when it's clear that the owners are using it as a cash cow almost. As I said, the lack of engagement with the parish's seat. Do you want to club together and make a community pub? I've been disappointed with that. It's not just the last pub in the village, it is the last community building in the village. And I was under the impression that when we moved motions and they were unanimously agreed over 2 years ago, that would carry some weight, but it sounds like it doesn't carry any weight. The Crown in Southport is a perfect example. The Red Lion is a perfect example of how it could be viable, but I'm not an expert in that field, so I understand where Paul is coming from, that I'll lose any qualification race with the company. So it's and also they're not saying the pub's unprofitable. It is profitable. It's just claiming it's not viable. It's not worth the 2.375% return they get on their £100,000. So I'd like to move a motion for refusal. Can you tie that up into any planning policy for them? Or am I?
Fair to say, have we got a second to affirm?
Oh,
Yes.
Yeah, I'm happy to second that.
Would you like to speak now? Or?
Yeah, I'll speak now. I think my biggest worry is that viability report, because I can understand the lack of engagement from the community when you say there's only 10 objectors, but that is because this lack of investment has given them a community facility that hasn't been tailored to the new needs of the village, as we heard from the parish. That was good 40 years ago, but lack of investment has meant it's not kept up to speed with what the new people in the village want to see today by either the decor or the offering. And that could have happened. That should have happened along the way. So I do think there's a need, and you can always make, as with the Red Line, you can always make it a place of destination. And I think if that was on the doorstep, this better offering of a community pub, you would get that support from the villagers and you would see the need there, because people would always rather be local than have to travel to go to a pub. So I would like to support this because I would like it to see the pub stay. I think it's important for villagers.
Much, Councillor here. At this point, do we need to come up with our reasons for?
So I think in trying to sum up where the concerns are, notwithstanding the conclusions of the 2 viability assessments, members are expressing concerns about their view of the conflict with 2 criteria in policy CF2, namely around the building no longer being needed and whether or not it's economically viable. And you're pointing to the lack of investment that there has been over a sustained period of time and the lack of evolution of the offer associated with that. So that I think is what you're effectively tabling.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
So I think I would add to that the evidence of it hasn't been marketed as such as a.
No, I mean that's one of the things I picked up in this report. Actually, is I've got like 3 stickers showing each one, but I mean the business overview. He states that there's no real interest from any private operators or other regional pub groups. They haven't put it up for sale, so because there's no interest from anybody if you haven't put it up for sale. If somebody quotes like that, but it's just strange.
Okay, well, I'll open it for the debate. Mr. Hey, you perhaps like to say something?
Yes, I mean, I will support the motion because I think there is something to hang it on, which is this policy CF1. And I think we're all very keen, as was seen from the unanimous motion that was passed a couple of years back, on supporting community facilities and pubs in particular. And we've seen this before. I've seen it around where owners of pubs, they don't run the pub, they just own the pub. It's an asset to them, and sometimes they run it down and tenants cannot, run a pub. My son worked in one actually, and it was really difficult to work in it and people didn't want to come. So I think we need to hang this motion on the policy, but stand up for what we passed at full council.
Anybody else wish to add to the debate?
Great one, really. Once it's gone, it's gone. West Hagbourne will lose a bit of its colour, an asset which potentially could be of great value to the village if it was appropriately developed. Once it's gone, it's just houses. So I wish to support the motion.
Yeah, if this was just building the houses, leaving the pub alone, I don't think I'd have much problem with it. But I know I made a fuss about the car park, but it is a valid point. When I went past at the weekend, the cars were all the way up the road. I can't believe it can't be viable. I'll give you, for instance, the pub a pub in Didcot has a stroke day, so people have a stroke invited, and all the carers go there once a week. If you've got organisations like that, it's probably an ageing village, I'm guessing. There's lots of people that could be marketed, so as people said. So obviously, I'm going to support the motion.
Thank you very much.
I think it's quite balanced, because I think that I think it certainly could be viable. And I think what it needs is to reinvent itself really completely as a community building, and that would have a different offer. It's not viable because it's being run down physically, and it's not welcoming. Things that have been mentioned are not marketed. The lack of support from the community doesn't help us particularly. So that would have been, and I think that the motion at council is easier to apply if you have a community backing that is evidenced.
Yes.
I am concerned that West Hagbourne is going to become very isolated without the loss of this only community building. It being the last, well, not the last, but the last community building, because that, as Millie mentioned, that you can't just really walk to the other villages. It's not safe to do so. And of course, the other thing that has already been said is that all these other pubs that we know that are around that are doing very, very well. We talked about this only local people go to this pub. There's only a small village of 300 people, but there's Didcot right next door with 30,000 or so people, and those other pubs have people from Didcot come to them because they are good places to come to. So it's this, bad pub versus good pub. If it was a good pub, if it did regenerate, it would be viable. Sure, it would be very successful, because that's what we see in so many other places.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, I think we're there in that case. We're ready to go to a vote. So we'd like to sum up. So
Not a major sum up, don't worry. Just to clarify that we don't just represent 300 residents of the West Hagbourne here, we're for the whole of South Oxfordshire, and as a as a resident of Didcot myself, I often drive past this pub, and I say I used to go in it quite a bit. And if this was the red line, it'd be the other way around, because that's on a dead end. I would really struggle to see. They've had to work incredibly hard to make that an incredible place where people have to sort out. It's on the main road. The passing train would be incredible if they got it up and running. Got policies for CF2. So I really think, in years to come, if they turn this around, CF2,
CF1.
if they can turn it around, I think we can look back and actually have some pride that we protected this community asset. I hope that if this does go, you do support my motion, and it does go through, the parish council maybe looks to the future and actually sees what's potential there, and they do ask for it to be a community asset rather than what it is at the moment, which clearly it's not an asset currently. Thank you.
Very much, Councillor Stone. Yes, I think we're just going to vote then. All those in favour of the motion to refuse this application on the grounds that we are contrary to policy in our views, CF1, we're not, and we also are not satisfied about the viability assessment having been done sufficiently. Okay, well, all those in favour.
Just before it goes to the vote, is there anything I'd like to say?
I just want to stress, just inform you really that if it is refused and it goes to appeal, that we would have 2 liability assessments that are very much against the motions being put forward. Just to make you aware. And a second one, just for clarification, really, reference to CF1. Am I right in saying the refusal reasons are regards to pub is determined that the community facility is needed, and secondly, the opinion that it is economically viable? Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're not. I would just trying to add to it. We're not. I can't contest with the liability officers with their qualifications, but what I can trump them on is I'm local, and we're local, and we understand the area. So I would certainly argue that for them.
Okay, so we'll go for the vote. All those in favour of the motion to refuse the application? All those against? All those abstaining? Motion is carried. Okay, thank you very much. We now go on to our next item, which is 23 Reading Road, Finley, and it's on page 77 of our papers. Simon Kitson is our officer tonight. When you're ready, Simon, please take us through it.
The application now before the committee seeks full planning permission and listed building consent for the conversion of the rear of number 23 Reading Road, Henley, to a 1-bed dwelling. The site is within the built-up limits of Henley, within the main conservation area. It also falls within the primary retail frontage as defined within the local plan. The report sets out the case for approval. We'll highlight a few key points. The building has been extended since the late 1980s as a result of a permission to extend the existing shop front. This resulted in the removal of the original rear wall of the shop. Planning permission for the residential conversion of that extension was granted in 2009. This was not implemented. The 2016 application for change of use and upwards extensions to the rear of the property was refused on neighbouring amenity and heritage grounds. Council had no issue with the change of use. The current proposal is similar to the 2009 approval. It would involve the conversion of the extension into a flat, the new internal partition separating the residential accommodation from a retained retail area at the front. Council's economic development team have no objection to the reduction in the size of the retail unit. They support the proposal on the basis that they consider a smaller unit to be more viable in the current climate, provided that both the shop front and the basement storage would be retained. They both would be in this proposal. As with the previous schemes, no parking is proposed. However, the site is within a very sustainable town centre location where both the council and the Highways Authority have supported car-free development. The Highways Authority have no objection to this scheme. No changes proposed to the front of the property. Access to the flat would be via the existing entrance, which already serves 2 upper storey flats. The external alterations would be uncontentious, largely consisting of roof lights and fenestration changes. There's no objection from the Conservation Officer to any of the proposed works. I have some photos to put it into context. This is the front of the site. Most of the properties within the terrace have similar mixed uses, combining flats and retail frontages. This is the existing unit, and the 1980s extension starts to the rear of the steps. View towards the frontage and the approximate position of the new dividing wall with the flat. And this is the retail storage area, which would be retained with toilet facilities provided. Part of the existing yard to the rear, which would be retained for the benefit. Lastly, this is the view from the neighbouring car park to the rear. The gate featured in several objections to the application. It's been in there since at least 2016. Attended the previous site with it. Legal right to access the property as a civil matter and not to planning consideration. To summarise the report, the proposal would create a 1-bed dwelling within a sustainable town centre location with convenient access to a range of key services and facilities. Site constraints are not materially different when the council last granted planning permission. Officers are satisfied with the proposal would retain a valid commercial use within the original building. This would not conflict with the development plan. There's no objection from the Conservation Design team, the Economic Development team, or the Highways Authority. As the proposal is also considered acceptable in residential amenity terms, recommended for approval, subject to the conditions set out in the report.
Thank you very much. Our public speakers tonight, we just have one also, Mr. Kevin Jackson. I'd like to tell us about your scheme. When you're ready, you'll have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair and members, for the opportunity to speak. My name is Gavin Jackson. I'm the architect for the freeholders. Just a couple of other small points in addition to the case officer's report. In terms of its residential use, the previous approval was for a 2-bed unit, where the
kitchens inside the main reception room. We've reduced the density of that, so it's a single bedroom. With view that it creates a greater for the user. In support of the retail part of the application, relevant is an approval granted within the last year at number 5 Friday Street. We had the OS plan. The Friday Street is just beyond the top left frame there. Number 5 Friday Street, an application was granted to reduce the retail area to just 13 square meters. And our application has 40 square meters of retail. So that's the case. Thank you.
Much. Do we have any questions for Mr. Jackson? No. I see none. Thank you. Free to go. Right. Do any questions? Are there no objections? I don't think. No, Councillor Harlott's not here. Councillor Jackson, give questions for the officer.
It's not a quick one. It's a storage thing. It's to do with the waste bins, the arrangements for that. Yeah, the arrangements for waste bins.
At the moment, they're showing the bin storage in the courtyard garden. There is a question over whether they can lawfully take them out back in the property and across the car park, because the Queen Street News car park. And ultimately, it's one for the landlord to resolve. If they can't negotiate access across there, then they have to use the same refuse collection arrangement that the current flats use, the 2 flats apart. And adjacent to it, there'd be a sack collection.
Is this a planning consideration?
Well, waste is a planning consideration, but I don't think it's a barrier to delivering this. There is essentially a civil matter which will affect how they deliver the waste storage. I don't think an insurmountable issue.
Is that just the waste for the flats, or are you talking about the business waste as well? Where's the business waste?
The business waste will be collected under the same arrangement they currently have. There's no existing tailgate at the front. There's no access at the rear. So continue to waste collection.
Can you clarify if there's any PE rights? I mean, if he refuses today and they shop the shop for a while, they'd be able to do this anyway, wouldn't they?
There are a lot of exemptions in PE legislation, one of which I believe applies to listed buildings. But that's more the rationale behind it is to protect the historic interest of the building.
Trying to give the applicant an idea.
Okay, any further questions for the officer? Oh,
with the gates.
Well, the gate's been that was the subject of several objections to the scheme, saying that the gate's been created without planning permission. The gate was there when I visited the site in 2016. It's been there immune from any form of enforcement action to lawful access. It is
no further questions for the officer then. I think we'll look for motion. Councillor.
I move motion to support officer's recommendation here. I think it's at least we're not losing a retail unit and we're gaining a affordable location, apartment, really, very good location. Can't see enough to refuse it.
Jay, can I just come in with some advice in terms of we need to
the listed building as well.
The listed building as well as the planning, please.
I'll propose both.
Yeah, I'd like to second it because I do support this application, which is recognised at odds with the town council. In fairness, Henry were rightly concerned about the erosion of retail space, because on the neighbourhood plan, we do lack enough retail. But what is happening nationally as well, we're seeing larger companies equally downsizing as more goes online, etc. So I think we're very happy that there is going to be the retention of some retail space, which is actually quite adequate and in demand for the smaller businesses, niche businesses, which that road attracts, because I too am on the Reading Road as a trader. And also the view was about the concern over parking. But equally, on a larger retail unit, you would have staff parking there, etc. So you would possibly have more than there would be for this one residential flat. And on the waste, the businesses put out their waste onto the street. You put your bags or your bin there. You can get more regular collections there, so it's not a blight on the pavement. And the same would happen actually with the residents. They would just have to put the bag out at the front. So I think it's a good one to support, actually.
Thank you much, Councillor Lear. We'll open this for debate then. Who wish to speak? Councillor Gould.
Just a quick one. It's lovely to see a one-bed property in Henley. Got one for one of the 4 beds from someone I haven't seen them recently. So ask for this.
Anyone else wish to speak? Right, I see. In that case, do you want to sum up?
Yes. One bed place would be more expensive for most 4 bedrooms than the rest of them. Let's be fair. Car parking, this is a sustainable location, and it's got a train station, plenty of buses, etc. So I'm not too concerned about the car parking. I won't make any comment about town council not sending someone to speak, because I'm sure Ken wouldn't say it in another village. So I think most people are going to support this. So Karen, thank you.
In that case, if we proceed to a vote. All those in favour of the motion to approve the application? Very good. And it's also
The planning.
anyone?
To do this building.
All those in favour of the listed building? Application? And it's also unanimous. So. First meeting is the
Susie, please can we end the broadcast?